In today's video, I'm going to discuss an article that was published this month that talks about VA employees leaving due to the rise of new cases and quota demands. Also, I'm going to explain how this can affect your claim. So make sure you stick around. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Dwayne Kimball, owner and founder of KMD 89 VA Claims Consulting, United States Army veteran and retired VA rating specialist. Today's video, I'm going to talk about an article a subscriber sent me, and I looked at it, and I looked at it, and I looked at it, and I was like, hey, I have to talk about this, okay? So it's going to be on VA employees leaving due to the rise of new cases and quota demands. But as always, before I get into this video, make sure you go out and pick up a new book, VA Claim Success. Promise you, it is a game changer and will help you be successful maximizing your VA benefits. Now, today's video, an article that was published that talks about VA employees leaving, okay? Now, a lot of you know I'm a former VA employee, retired, right? Retired early, but I retired. I know several other people just at my regional office that I worked at that left. And I can say, talking with them, out of all the reasons, you know, some people have maybe 4 or 5 reasons they left. There was one reason that was the common denominator for all of us. And what I'm going to talk about today is one of those reasons. And also, I'm going to talk about, can this affect your claim? Now, this video is going to be a 2-part video because I don't want to make it too long, all right? But I'll make sure that I schedule both videos in the same week for you, all right? So that being said, you know I got some slides. Somebody told me a while ago, I know you're Army because you love those slides, but I'm going to share parts of this article with you and talk about it, all right? So, slide number 1. Here in slide number 1, you can see this is the top of the article, okay? So again, I didn't go through and make slides for all of the entire article, okay? So it says, thousands of workers leave the VA amid a flood of new cases and quota demands. Claims processors with the Department of Veterans Affairs say a rigid quota system pits their livelihoods against the veterans they signed up to help. I'm gonna read that again. Says a rigid quota system pits their livelihoods against the veterans they sign up to help. Now, I worked in that system and I agree with that statement, okay? VA management thinks, oh, we got a backlog, let's make mandatory overtime. Let's increase the quota. People will have to work faster to get more claims done to reduce the backlog. That's management's, upper management's thought process. But as a manager coming from the private sector and working for Fortune 500 companies, I know that's not the way it works, all right? Now, slide number 2. Here we have the president signing in the bill for the PACT Act, which I think is a great thing. Okay, it's great. But when that happens, you got to think there's going to be a flood of claims on top of an already stressed system. And with people leaving, and some of those people leaving with experience, now your claim is going to be affected because those new employees, they still got to get trained. It takes time. And I stated in other videos, it took me about 24 months just to get comfortable where I go in the system, rate a claim, boom, send it out. Nobody looks at it, okay? Probably, I would say maybe more around 16 months, but just being a little bit nervous, okay? So it goes on to say, this article, the PACT Act expanded benefits to millions of veterans exposed to toxic substances when it was enacted in August of last year. But that has stressed the VA workers' task in moving cases along amid a backlog, mandatory overtime, I talked about that in the first slide, inadequate training, and quota demands, according to 2 former claims processors and 4 current processors who spoke to NBC. I'm pretty sure they didn't give their names, which is totally understandable. Now, inadequate training. I can't, as a former rater, I can't tell you how many times the way I found out a change had happened, maybe a neighbor or a news article or a commercial. And I'm like, wait a minute. And then we get training on it later. You can't do that. They know that this PACT Act, they knew that this PACT Act, they were doing this. So that training should have been put together months in advance. And I don't know how they did the training for this, but some of these individuals are telling you inadequate training. Now, you have some regional offices that have some outstanding trainers. The regional office I worked at, the trainers that I felt that were outstanding, I can still remember their first name and what they look like. And I've been retired for 5 years now. Then I can tell you some that they really weren't that good and they shouldn't have been training other people, okay? Then it goes on to say the processors were struggling to manage the workload even before the PACT Act, with more than 2,000 having resigned or retired since 2022, okay? I was part of that 2,000, and I can tell I know of 10 other individuals that were part of that number. The number of departures have grown each year. Data shows. The PACT Act came in like a bull. One of the processors said, morale is on the floor. Wow. What does that tell you? Morale is on the floor. Now, when I was at the VA, the last time they made a law change, 3 conditions to, they added 3 conditions to 38 CFR 3.309 subpart E, tropical diseases, that's Agent Orange exposure. They added 3 conditions. And it was like cases on top of cases on top of cases. Now, that was just for Agent Orange, 3 conditions. The PACT Act covers Agent Orange and Gulf War and numerous of issues. So those cases under the PACT Act has probably quadrupled. Okay, and I can remember back in 2010 when they just added those 3 conditions, man, it took time because we had to I was looking at evidence from like 1968, the 70s, the 80s, the effective dates going back to the 80s, doing a stage rating. Those ratings take time. And guess what? I was still on a quota, looking at thousands of pieces of paper. And that's what these VA employees are talking about. Okay, let's move on. Slide number 3. We get into another employee said at least 25 new claims enter her queue each day on top of the cases she did not get the day before. Now, I'm thinking this has to be a VSR because the RVSR, I would seriously doubt that the supervisor, will put 25 claims in RVSR's queue. You probably heard me talk about VBMS, Victor, Bravo, Mike, Sierra. That's what they're talking about in the queue. The queue is in that software, VBMS. That's where all the electronic files are, and we go in and look at all the evidence, okay? So that's more than likely, I would say, a VSR, because if you put 25 claims that are ready for decision in a rater's queue, they're going to sit there for a while because they're not going to get through all 25 cases in a day unless they're hearing loss and tinnitus. And you can knock those out in like maybe, 20 minutes, all right? Confused by new regulations under the PACT Act, she said she began making multiple errors for the first time on the job, which lowered her performance scores during 3 monthly quality checks and delayed a scheduled promotion. Now, what she's talking about is, again, that training for the PACT Act. how was that training passed out? Now, I can look at the VA regulation as it pertains to the PACT Act, and it sounds pretty straightforward. But when you're looking at through that evidence in that veterans file and what they submitted, it's a different beast, okay? Multiple errors. What are those errors called? Duty to assist errors. Guess where you're going to see them at? High-level review, and you're going to hear that Dro say, oh, there's a duty to assist error. This person is telling you this is part of the reason. And then she goes on to say it's impossible. You're falling in the sand and you can't get out. Or get out of. I'm sorry. The VA launched an aggressive hiring push to prepare for the surge in the claims. Now has about 12,900 processors. Nearly 5,000 of them joined in 2022, and more than 6,500 were brought on board in 2023. The agency said, but seasoned workers worry mounting pressures of the job will keep the door revolving. Okay, so when I worked in the private sector, there was a thing called retention, trying to keep good talent. If you have the individuals that have been there a while leaving and new individuals leaving, you have no retention control. I never heard anything about retaining VA employees or incentives at the VA when I worked there, okay? They go on to say the VA has become a turnstile for employees, and third claim processors said, you see a lot of people come and a lot of people go, especially now with this point system, it's crushing people. Okay, I fully understand what that processor is saying. I worked in that system. And you heard me say that, hey, I worked in the private sector and management as well. What I learned working in the private sector for Fortune 500 companies is almost non-existent in management at the VA, okay? So upper management, again, is gonna say, hey, let's make them work mandatory overtime. Really? That is your game plan to help reduce the backlog? Oh, let's increase the quota so they have to rush through these claims to try and make that quota. So management is only concerned about, hey, we got 20,000 cases at our regional office. We need to get through 10,000 of these in a month. How do we do that? Implement mandatory overtime and raise the production quota. That's not going to work. You're going to have pushback from employees. More so, you're going to have more errors. So not only is there a production quota, meaning each employee has to work a certain amount of cases a day, there also is a quality performance that needs to be met. And if that person is going through those claims extremely fast, they're going to miss something. I used to miss stuff going through really fast, thinking I touched everything and missed something, and guess what? I got an error. Sometimes I had to call an error on myself, okay? So how can this affect your claim? Guess who's caught in the middle between employees and management at the VA? The veteran, okay? And if your claim had a DTA error, now I'm not saying if you had a DTA error, it was due to an employee rushing. It could have been, hey, they were slow, not trained, not took the time to review the claim. It could be a host of reasons, okay? But at the end of the day, you're caught in the middle. You have to be an adjudicator for yourself. How do you do that? You invest your time, you get educated, you give that employee what they need to move your claim to the next stage. Send it in 10 to 15,000 pages of evidence and you only need 1 or 2 pages out of those thousands of pages does not help your claim get to the next level. Somebody has to look through all of that paperwork and find that needle in a haystack. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't submit all that paperwork. That's totally up to you. But don't get mad if that VA employee doesn't see it, because they're thinking, I'm behind on my quota. I gotta rush, okay? So just keep that in mind when you're putting together or developing for your claim and submitting that evidence to the VA. So with that being said, make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification button. Don't forget to share this video with your fellow veterans and also look out for part 2 of this article. Thank you.